Hello everyone, it's Captain Sensible here, just going to give you a quick mini review before Mr. Smelly does his review. So today we're going to be looking at Nicolai New York Intense. I think this one's by Versace. Now the perfumer was David Hasselhoff and it was first released in 1981. The notes in this one are bergamot, lavender, patchouli and Mars bars. Now I quite like this one. If I had to give it a mark out of 10 I'd give it a 7 out of 10, but I don't, so I won't. Now my wife quite likes it as well actually. I've had good reactions from her, although unfortunately we're not really talking. We had a bit of a bad weekend, you see. We went away for the weekend to the country and I forgot my toothbrush, so my wife walked into the bathroom at the hotel where we were staying and I was using her toothbrush instead, and she said, "Oh, for goodness sake, do you have to use my toothbrush?" And I said, "Well darling, we've been married for 20 years, surely, you know, we're intimate enough, it doesn't matter, come on." She said, "No, I'm sorry, it's unhygienic, I don't want you using it." So I said, "Alright, fair enough, I won't use it. But can you tell me a better way to get this dog shit off the bottom of my shoes?"
Hello everyone, welcome back to all of you in the Smelly Army. So today it's time for a fragrance showdown between two incredibly classy and beautiful fragrances, two of my absolute favourite 10 out of 10 fragrances in my collection, which are often compared to each other. So we'll be getting into that in a moment. Before we do that, I'd just like to invite anyone who hasn't yet to join my private members club. It's a thing I do that is on Patreon, where I put out an extra Mr. Smelly video every week and some other content too. There's actually been 2 videos this week, and there's loads of stuff backloaded in there. So if you join today, there's quite a lot of stuff that you can sit down and watch. And the link to join the private members club is in the description of this video. The most recent weekly video was on 3 under-the-radar clones, one of which was Altamir by Ted Lapidus, which smells very similar to the discontinued Gaultier Squared from Jean Paul Gaultier, and there were a couple of other really nice clones in that video. And just the other day, yesterday, I did a video about some new ones from Dua, some first impressions, including their take on the £1,450 fragrance from Roger Dove, which is called Chypre Extraordinaire, and Dua have got one called Chypre X. I also talked about my first impressions of their version of Green Valley from Creed and their new Creed Aventus thing, the 11Z01 batch clone that they've done. So if you're interested in that, sign up to the private members club. There's loads of great stuff going on in there, and we're trying to build a really nice community, and I've set the fee very, very low. It's a really low monthly fee. Hope to see you in there. Anyway, back to the subject of today's video. So it's going to be Creed's Bois du Portugal versus Nicolai New York Intense. Thumbnail. So yeah, also I'm going to mention actually Lalique Pour Homme from the house of Lalique, which is also quite similar and really, really inexpensive. So let's start with the one that started it all for me. It was my first ever video review on my channel. I've said many times that it's my favourite fragrance of all time, and I think I might still think that, but not entirely sure. Let's see what I think in today's showdown. So Bois du Portugal from Creed, first released back in 1987, a really beautiful, gentlemanly, refined, elegant fragrance. The designation, I think, probably oriental woody. I never really find designations like that very helpful. The notes in the fragrance, more importantly, are bergamot, lavender. Those are the top notes. In the mid you've got cedarwood, and in the base sandalwood, vetiver and ambergris. It's a very refined fragrance. It smells classic. It has a slightly old school feel, so not everyone is going to take to it. Some people might feel it's a little bit stuffy. It opens with a really nice, beautiful green bergamot elements. I've got some on a tester strip that I'll grab in a minute actually. There's definitely a lot of lavender in there. So some people say it's a sort of a barbershop smell, but I think it's much more than that. And it has a really, really nice, complex kind of woody, dusty feel about it. And it does have that lovely Creed ambergris in the base, and the dry down on it opens a little bit green, but once it gets to the dry down you get this kind of powdery, woody, dusty feel in a really good way. And when it clings to your jumper or your jacket or your shirt, and even if you sniff it the next day, I really just love the way this fragrance develops over time. It's sort of warming, it's somewhat fresh in the opening, it's very gentlemanly, it's refined, and it's It's maybe a little bit similar, I say, sometimes to Chanel's Pour Monsieur, a Chypre fragrance. It's got that little bit of green bitterness in there that we associate with the Chypre genre of fragrances. And I absolutely find this to be my favourite Creed fragrance and one of my favourites of all time. Now, the fragrance that we're going to be putting it up against today is New York Intense from the house of Nicolai. I think they were formerly known as Parfums de Nicolai. So originally in 1989 they released New York, and that one got reformulated at some point. It was a favourite of the famous perfume critic Luca Turin, who really loved it and said it was his signature scent, I think, for 10 years. Something went wrong with the formula, some restrictions on ingredients came in, and apparently it wasn't what it used to be. They then brought out, more recently, I think in the 2000 and something, New York Intense, which has apparently, according to Luca Turin, restored the fragrance to its former glory. I think now the original New York is discontinued. You can only get New York Intense. So this one, many people compared the original New York, and still do the Intense version, to Bois du Portugal from Creed. The notes are completely different, so it's a little bit weird. There are some the same, but the notes for New York Intense are petitgrain, bergamot, lavender, thyme and artemisia in the top. In the mid, you've got black pepper, clove, cinnamon, lavender and chamomile, and in the base, oak moss, vanilla, styrax, incense, musk, civet and castoreum. I should mention the comparative price then. Bois de Portugal by Creed now comes in two sizes, 50ml or 100ml. This is an older 120ml bottle. The 50ml bottle that you can get now is £155 retail, and the 100ml bottle is £215. It's very expensive. You might be able to get it a little bit cheaper than that at discounters. New York Intense is better value for money because you can get a 30ml bottle like mine here for €58, which translates to about £50, or you can get a 100ml bottle for €171 or £145 roughly speaking. So much better value for money per mil, but does it smell as good? Well, let's see. Much longer note listing there, and the fragrances are much more similar than the rather different note lists would imply. I certainly think there are things in Bois de Portugal that are not in the note listing. I think there's probably a bit of vanilla in there too, and maybe even some spiciness, some cinnamon could be in there too. They list the things they want you to think about with the fragrance, but they don't always tell you all the, it's not an ingredient list, it's just a suggestion of what they want you to smell. Much longer note listing on New York Intense. What they share then is the very nice kind of dusty old school vibe, a powderiness, and they both have a nice green citrusy bergamot opening, which you definitely get in New York Intense as well as Bois de Portugal. I've got them on paper strips. When you compare the two fragrances, you're going to like one if you like the other, no doubt, and they are very similar, but I can always tell, I think, the two fragrances apart. So this one that's New York Intense, and that one is Bois de Portugal. New York Intense is a little bit more, to me, powdery and sweet. Luca Turin referred to New York Intense, I think, as something about powdery biscuit or something like that. And there's a sort of sweet spiciness about it that it does remind you maybe a bit of biscuits. And he also talked about petit beurre, and you get that with this one more so than with Bois de Portugal. So Bois de Portugal, by contrast, emphasises a little bit more, to me, the greenness and a certain bitterness that comes in the opening, but that stays throughout the life of the fragrance. They both have really nice lavender notes. They both have a sort of woody undertone, but there's a little bit more of a sort of green, almost piquant quality to the Bois de Portugal. To me, very similar New York Intense, but a little bit more of an accent towards vanilla, towards powderiness, maybe spiciness, with the Bois de Portugal a little bit more green and bitter. So very, very similar, but to me, I would say this one, New York Intense, catering a little bit more perhaps to modern niche tastes, leaning a bit towards things like Invasion Barbar by MDCI Parfums, with that kind of slightly powdery sweet element to the barbershop type fragrance genre, whereas the Bois de Portugal maybe leans a little bit more old school. They both have a classic feel, but the Bois de Portugal a little bit more so, a little bit more bitter, a little bit more green, and something in it that's reminiscent of classic cologne type fragrances from the 50s and the 60s, perhaps things like Chanel Pour Monsieur, Monsieur de Givenchy. It's kind of like an EDP thickened up version of those, which to me is really appealing. But if you want to get a one that's more likely to be crowd pleasing and less likely to smell dated, although they both smell a little bit classic, I'd say New York Intense probably would be the one. For me, I love the greenness that's there in the Bois du Portugal, and there's just that hint of that classic Creed thing, the ambergris, that you don't quite get in the New York Intense. So I would just narrowly, although I think they're both 10 out of 10, I'd probably say my favourite is Bois du Portugal. Performance, that's a big category. So I've just talked about the smell, but the performance is important, of course. Both very, very good performers. Bois du Portugal, one of the best performing Creeds. I do have an older bottle. I can't comment on the modern formula, but as far as I know, it's, I think, still pretty good. But people can let me know if you have the modern formula. New York Intense also really, really nice. Neither of them are really obnoxious in projection, but you will be smelled. And if you go heavy, you can achieve quite a nice cloud around you. And they both last very, very well. The type of notes, these spicy, rich, robust notes that are in both really make them last rather well. So great in performance, not beast mode, but perhaps just the level below, really where you want your fragrance to be. Nice performers. So for me, personal favourite, Bois du Portugal, because I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. For likability and value for money, New York Intense is not only its equal really in smell, but perhaps edges it in the extent to which people around you are more likely to appreciate this. That spiciness, the almost buttery creaminess, something about almost like a Guerlain-esque smell. And of course, Patricia de Nicolai, the lady behind Nicolai Parfums, is part of the Guerlain family. But she wasn't able to actually have a career with Guerlain, so she went out on her own. So if you like Guerlain fragrances, maybe Guerlain Heritage or some of their more exclusive niche stuff, there's something of that quality about it. So beautiful, beautiful fragrance, and a real appealing niche fragrance with a slightly classic feel. Alternatives then, a really great inexpensive alternative to Bois du Portugal from Creed is Lalique's Lalique Pour Homme Eau de Parfum, the one with the lion's head. There's another one with a horse's head that has the same name but smells different. Very, very similar kind of smell. Got it on a card here. Bit more of a kind of fresh, light feel, maybe lemony, a bit more of a yellowy green opening that sticks around longer for me on this one, and a little bit lighter and less robust, and a bit more vanilla in it for me. Just slightly feels less rich and complex, but really, really pleasant. And the price you can pick that one up for, I saw on Notino today, £31.14 for a 125ml bottle. So if you fancy getting a bit of this feel, this is again kind of 85% similar to Bois du Portugal. It gets you really close to the kind of feel, and it performs really nicely as well. I've got some compliments on this one. So, you know, you're not cheating yourself at all if you just go for the Lalique Pour Homme EDP. I'd favour the Bois du Portugal a bit personally, but there's not that much in it, and when you consider the price, this might be a great place to start. The other option you have got there is one out-and-out clone that I know of Bois du Portugal, which is by Dua Fragrances. Masham Raza, the man behind Dua, I think Bois du Portugal, he said, is his favourite fragrance of all time, and they've got one called Royal Portugal. Your 30ml of that is $50, about £37. So I think that's actually really good value, because it does smell that is just almost identical to Bois du Portugal. It has a little bit more accent on that green bergamot burst in the opening. That sticks around a bit longer, which you might find a good thing, and performance on that very strong, at least equal to Bois du Portugal. So those are your choices if you like the idea of Bois du Portugal, and you will, I think many people wonder which one's best, New York Intense or Bois du Portugal. I hope I've given you some idea of the answer to that question, in my humble opinion. So please go ahead and check out the private members club, unlock all the fun footage that's in there, and join in our fun community that we've got going in there, and let me know what you think about the video that I've made today. Remember, whatever you're doing in life, let's project. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.